All right, welcome to our deep dive on longevity. Living longer and healthier.
Hmm.
And you're not just interested in, outliving your life expectancy, but actually staying healthy,
Hmm.
right? Avoiding all those chronic diseases that can make aging well kind of a slow decline.
Right.
So we're going to dive into excerpts from Dr. Peter Attia's book, Outlive.
Hmm.
He is a longevity expert, and this book is like a treasure trove of science-backed advice
Yeah.
that you can actually use. And we're going to cover a lot of ground. We'll talk about like a mysterious island compound, the dangers of seemingly harmless fat, a heart scan that changed Dr. Attia's whole life, and a powerful exercise strategy he calls the centenarian decathlon. So to help us connect the dots, we have our expert guide here with us, ready to dive in?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so Dr. Attia kicks things off with this concept of medicine 3.0. Basically, it's all about preventing problems before they even start, which I gotta admit, that's pretty different from the like, wait till something breaks and then fix it approach, you know?
Yeah. It's a total shift in perspective. We usually worry about, like a sudden heart attack or accident, the fast death. But
Yeah.
Dr. Adia, he wants us to focus on preventing the slow death,
Yeah.
right? The kind that comes from chronic diseases that take decades to develop.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's all about understanding your own personal risks, and then taking action to change your trajectory.
Right, right. And he even uses his own experience with HRT, hormone replacement therapy,
Yeah.
to kind of show how the medical community sometimes like misinterprets risk. Like I remember when that one HRT study came out and the media just blew it up, scared everybody. But when you really dig into it, the picture is much more complex.
Right.
That whole thing really made me think like, we got to look beyond the headlines and really try to understand these studies.
It is so crucial to be an informed patient and to work with providers that get your longevity goals and to understand the long-term implications of your choices. That's really the key here.
Instead of just accepting our, expiration date, we can actually shape how we age.
Exactly.
Now, when it comes to healthy aging, there's no better example than centenarians.
Right.
These are those folks who live to 100 or older.
Yeah.
So what's their secret? Are they just lucky, or is there something more to it?
It's definitely more than just luck. Genetics play a role, of course, but centenarians, they often delay or even avoid the diseases that usually get us.
Right.
They manage to kind of squeeze that decline at the end of life and extend that health span.
I like that, squeezing that decline. And then Dr. Attia brings up this compound called rapamycin.
Right.
It was discovered on Easter Island, and it's actually been shown to extend lifespan in a bunch of different organisms.
Yeah.
Easter Island, centenarians, and a longevity elixir. Okay, I'm hooked. But how does this rapamycin stuff even work?
So it's still early in the research, but rapamycin seems to target a cellular pathway. It's called mTOR that regulates growth and metabolism. Yeah, and what's really interesting is that by inhibiting mTOR, rapamycin kind of mimics the effects of calorie restriction, which is another thing we know can, increase lifespan in some cases.
So you're saying like this compound could like mimic the benefits of calorie restriction, but without the super strict diet.
Well, that's the hope.
That sounds almost too good to be true. But speaking of diet,
Yeah.
Dr. Attia kind of paints a pretty bleak picture of the modern food landscape, calling it crisis of abundance for our genes. What does he mean by that?
So our genes, they evolved over a long time to help us survive when food was scarce, when it was hard to come by.
Right.
And now we are surrounded by tons of calories, especially from all this processed food, sugary drinks. That mismatch is a huge driver of metabolic dysfunction.
It's kind of funny when you think about it. Our ancestors struggled to find enough food, and now we're struggling to avoid it. It's like a total flip.
It really is.
And I love the analogy he uses. He compares our bodies to like bathtubs for storing fat. So once that subcutaneous fat layer, the one under our skin, once that fills up,
Yeah.
it starts spilling over into dangerous places like our liver, muscles, even around our organs.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
It's almost like our bodies just weren't designed to handle this much excess.
Right.
And then the worst offender in all of this, fructose. It's not just about the calories, it's how our bodies metabolize it differently,
Yeah.
leading to some real metabolic chaos. I used to think, all sugars were the same, but it's clear now that fructose is playing in a whole different lead.
It really is. Fructose bypasses certain metabolic checkpoints,
Yeah.
which makes it even more likely to, mess with our metabolic health.
So it's not just about watching your overall sugar intake. It's about like being mindful of where that sugar's coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already, shifting our mindset to like proactive healthcare, looking at centenarians, and even this potential of rapamycin. And we even dipped our toes into the treacherous waters of the modern diet. So what's next on our longevity journey?
Well, next we are going to dive into the heart of the matter, literally. Dr. Attia shares his personal experience with heart disease, and it really highlights the need for early intervention and a better understanding of the risks.
That's right. Dr. Attia actually had a heart scan that revealed early signs of atherosclerosis,
Hmm.
even though he thought he was living a pretty healthy lifestyle.
Yeah,
Talk about a wake-up call.
it really is.
Yeah.
Wow. And it really emphasizes that heart disease, it can sneak up on you even if you think you're doing everything right.
Oh, yeah.
And what's even more concerning is that traditional cholesterol tests, they often miss the mark when it comes to really assessing our risk.
So what are we missing? If cholesterol isn't the whole story, what else should we be looking at?
It comes down to the specific types of lipoproteins, the ones that carry cholesterol through your blood.
Yeah.
Dr. Attia really zeroes in on this thing called the ApoB particle. He calls it the real culprit in heart disease.
ApoB.
Uh-huh. Imagine these particles like tiny little submarines, okay? They're carrying cholesterol, and they sneak into your artery walls, and they cause damage over time. That's why just looking at your overall cholesterol, it's not enough.
That's a pretty vivid image.
Yeah, it is.
So these ApoB particles are like setting the stage for heart attacks and strokes, even if, our cholesterol numbers look okay on paper.
Exactly. And this whole inflammatory process, it starts way before you might experience any symptoms, like decades before. That's why Dr. Attia thinks we need to move beyond just looking at LDL, bad cholesterol,
Yeah.
and focus on actually lowering those ApoB levels. He even suggests, aiming for ApoB levels that are similar to those found in children.
Wow, okay. That's a pretty radical idea.
It-
But it makes sense if we're talking about really preventing heart disease, not just managing it after it's already taken hold.
Right.
Early intervention is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Shifting from reactive to proactive.
Yeah.
And that might mean, being more aggressive with lifestyle changes or maybe even medication to lower those ApoB levels.
Okay, speaking of aggressive diseases,
Right.
let's talk about cancer.
Yeah.
I know Dr. Attia acknowledges that the war on cancer hasn't been as successful as we'd hoped,
Right.
but he also highlights some really promising new approaches. So what's his take on cancer?
Well, cancer it's incredibly complex. It's not just one disease, but a whole collection of them.
Right.
And each one has its own quirks. And while there's no magic bullet, there's no one-size-fits-all cure, Dr. Attia explores two key vulnerabilities that we can try to target: their weird metabolism and their ability to evade the immune system.
Okay. One of the things that really stood out to me was the Warburg effect. It's this idea that cancer cells, they process energy differently than normal cells.
Right. Yeah. They rely on glucose for fuel, even when there's plenty of oxygen around, which it's pretty inefficient, but it also makes them vulnerable. That's a potential target.
And Dr. Attia makes this connection between cancer and metabolic dysfunction,
Right.
pointing out that, things like obesity and type 2 diabetes, they can actually fuel cancer growth.
Yeah. It all comes back to that metabolic health, right?
Yeah.
What's good for our metabolism is good for our overall health, including reducing that cancer risk.
Like all these pieces are connected.
They really are.
Now let's talk about immunotherapy. I've heard so much about it lately.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
It seems like a really promising area of cancer research. So Dr. Attia explains how it works by, harnessing the power of our own immune system to fight cancer. Can you break that down a little?
Sure. There are different types. There's CAR T-cell therapy, where you actually engineer a patient's own immune cells to target the cancer. And then there's checkpoint inhibitors, which basically, they release the brakes on the immune system so it can recognize and attack the cancer cells more effectively.
So instead of attacking the cancer directly, we're training the body to fight it on its own?
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I know there can be side effects with immunotherapy. So does Dr. Attia address that?
He does. He shares this story about a friend whose life was saved by checkpoint inhibitors. But it also highlights the potential side effects that can come with this kind of treatment. It's a reminder that while it's a game changer for many, it's not without its risks. It's like a balancing act, boosting the immune system to fight cancer, but also managing the potential for autoimmune reactions.
It sounds like we're still figuring out like how to use immunotherapy effectively.
Yeah, we're still early in the game.
But the potential is huge.
It is.
So, we talked about the heart, and now let's move to another organ that's often impacted by, this inflammatory process. The brain.
Right.
Dr. Attia has a lot to say about Alzheimer's prevention, and I think that's something that's, on a lot of people's minds as we get older.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's heartbreaking about Alzheimer's is there's no cure.
Right.
But Dr. Adia emphasizes that while we can't change our genes, we can definitely influence the factors that contribute to our risk.
Okay.
He talks about the role of genes like APOE and how lifestyle choices, managing blood sugar, optimizing sleep, even practicing good oral hygiene, all that can play a role.
Wait, hold on. Flossing can help prevent Alzheimer's.
Well, it's not just about the flossing itself. It's about reducing inflammation throughout the body,
Okay.
including in your gums,
Right.
because that can have systemic effects.
Yeah.
There's growing evidence suggesting that chronic inflammation in the mouth, it can actually contribute to inflammation in the brain.
Okay, I see the connection. So it's all about building a brain protection plan, right?
Exactly.
Early intervention. I
Yeah,
don't know.
making choices that support cognitive health throughout life.
Throughout life, absolutely.
Now, I love how Dr. Attia challenges us to create our own centenarian decathlon.
Oh, yeah.
An exercise program tailored to the specific activities we want to be doing in our later years.
I love that concept.
Instead of just hitting the gym aimlessly,
Right.
we should be focusing on exercises that will actually help us achieve our, centenarian decathlon goals. For me, I think that would include like hiking, playing with my grandkids, maybe even trying some archery.
Nice.
What about you? What would be in your centenarian decathlon?
Oh, I would love to be able to travel the world, explore new cultures, and just stay active enough to enjoy everything life has to offer.
I like it.
So yeah, strength training, flexibility exercises, maybe even some dance classes, who knows?
That's awesome. And Dr. Adier really breaks down the science behind different types of exercise,
Yeah.
emphasizing the importance of zone 2 cardio for mitochondrial health and VO2 max training for overall fitness.
Yeah. So zone 2 cardio, that's like the sweet spot.
Okay.
You're working hard enough to challenge your heart and lungs,
Yeah.
but not so hard that you're, gasping for air. Think like a brisk walk where you can still hold a conversation, but your heart's pumping.
Right.
And then VO2 max training, that's pushing your aerobic capacity to the limit,
Yeah.
which can improve your fitness and, reduce your risk of age-related decline.
So it's about finding that balance between like challenging yourself,
Right.
but also staying within a comfortable range.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not just about cardio.
No, not at all.
He talks about strength training, stability training, and avoiding injuries, especially as we age. I mean, what good is longevity if you're, too frail to enjoy it?
Right.
And he introduces this concept of rucking, which is basically walking with a weighted backpack. Yeah. He thinks it's great for building strength, endurance, and stability all at once. It kind of mimics how our ancestors used to carry heavy loads.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now let's get to the topic that always sparks debate. Nutrition.
Everybody's favorite.
Yeah. Dr. Adia acknowledges that there's so much confusing advice out there.
Oh, yeah.
And he encourages us to move beyond those simplistic diet labels and really understand how food affects our bodies individually. He breaks down these 3 core strategies for managing energy balance: calorie restriction, dietary restriction, and time-restricted feeding.
Right.
So let's start with calorie restriction, or CR. It's been shown to extend lifespan in, some organisms, but is it really sustainable for humans in the long run?
Well, it's definitely not for everyone, and Dr. Attia warns against taking it to extremes.
Right.
He stresses personalization and experimentation, maybe using tools like CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, to really fine-tune your approach.
Okay, so what about dietary restriction? Is it all about cutting out carbs or fats or some other evil food group?
It's much more nuanced than that. Dr. Attia wants us to think about which macronutrients work best for our own individual metabolisms. He talks about protein being super important for maintaining muscle mass as we age.
Oh, yeah.
And the different types of fats and their effects.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not about following a rigid diet. It's about finding a sustainable way of eating that supports our overall health and longevity.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then he delves into the science behind time-restricted feeding, or TR,
Right.
which is like limiting your eating window.
To a certain number of hours each day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've heard a lot about intermittent fasting. Is that the same thing?
It is. TR is a form of intermittent fasting,
Okay.
but it's not about starving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about, aligning your eating patterns with your body's natural rhythms, which can have a lot of benefits.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about diet and exercise, those two pillars of healthy aging. But Dr. Akia, he doesn't stop there. He actually goes on to talk about sleep, and honestly, this is where I really need to pay attention. I'm totally guilty of, like, burning the midnight oil a little too often.
Yeah, it's something a lot of us struggle with.
Yeah.
But he makes a really strong case for prioritizing sleep. He even shares his own experience with sleep deprivation during residency
Well,
and how it really took a toll on his health.
He really puts himself out there. I was surprised to learn just how much sleep deprivation can, like, mess with our physical and mental well-being. It increases our risk for everything,
Oh, yeah.
from, like, weight gain to heart disease to even Alzheimer's.
It's a reminder that, like, we can't really outsmart our need for sleep.
Yeah.
It's essential. It regulates hormones, it clears waste products from the brain, it supports cognitive function, metabolic health.
So when we actually prioritize sleep, we're not just resting our bodies, we're really investing in our longevity.
Exactly.
So it's not just about quantity, it's about quality too.
Oh, for sure.
So does he have any tips for, improving our sleep?
Yeah, he talks about optimizing your sleep environment, cutting back on alcohol before bed,
Mm,
even considering medication options like trazodone if you're having a lot of trouble.
okay.
But he also emphasizes like understanding your own personal sleep needs, right?
Right.
Experimenting, finding what works for you.
Okay, and finally, we get to a topic that I think is often overlooked in these, longevity discussions,
Yeah.
emotional health.
Yeah.
Dr. Atia gets really personal in Outlive, sharing his own struggles with anger, depression, even like almost losing his family
Wow. Yeah.
before finally seeking help.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And this is where I think Outlive goes beyond just like the physical aspects of longevity. It's a good reminder that a longer life, it's not truly fulfilling if you're not happy.
You got it.
And it was really inspiring to see someone like Dr. Atia, who's obviously, brilliant, successful, be so open about his struggles. It makes him more relatable
Right.
and shows that, we all have our challenges.
We all do. It's a good reminder that, you can't just focus on the physical stuff without addressing the emotional and mental parts too.
Right.
They're all connected.
And he talks about the limitations of like the traditional diagnose and prescribe approach to mental health,
Yeah, it's not always enough.
emphasizing the need for something more holistic, more personalized.
Right.
So what are some of the alternative approaches he explores?
Well, he talks about mindfulness, meditation, dialectical behavior therapy, even psychedelics in a therapeutic setting, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't shy away from, the tough stuff, things like trauma, addiction, the importance of self-compassion.
So it sounds like he's really advocating for a more integrated approach to health,
Absolutely.
one that recognizes how interconnected everything is.
Totally.
Mind, body, spirit.
Yeah, it's not just about adding years. It's about, living those years with meaning, purpose, well-being.
It's about living better.
Exactly.
So after this deep dive into Outlive, what are like the key takeaways for, someone listening who wants to live a longer, healthier, more fulfilling life?
Okay, I'd say 3 main points. 1, shift your mindset. Be proactive.
Yeah.
Don't wait for things to go wrong. Take action now.
Okay.
2, embrace personalization. Figure out what works for you. Experiment. And 3, don't forget about your emotional and mental health.
I like that. It's not just about living longer. It's about living better in every sense of the word.
That's it.
And Dr. Atia, he leaves us with this really powerful question. What good is a longer life if you're not happy or fulfilled? It's a good reminder to like really focus on what matters and make choices that align with our values,
It is. And as you continue on your longevity journey, think about your own centenarian decathlon. What do you want to be doing later in life? What steps can you take now to make that a reality?
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. Hopefully it's inspired you to take some action towards living a longer, healthier, and more fulfilling life. Thanks for joining us on this journey through Outlive.